Hi everyone, it's Darlene. As you know, I am a big fan of Copic markers, but I decided to buy a set of the Spectrum Noir markers. I bought the red set and see how they compared to a few of the red markers that I pulled out of my collection. So this isn't a big formal review of the Spectrum Noir markers, it's just a comparison of my experience with the red set and some of the red markers that I have. There are 6 markers that come with this set. This is the packaging for it. You can see if I pull this back that these are all the sets that are sold. The Spectrum Noir markers are not sold individually. You buy them in groups. They come in various size groups. This is the red collection right here. Let me show you. I made an actual test strip of the different colors so you can see how they compare. They're a little tiny bit off than the display here, but not too bad. These particular sets are sold at Simon Says Stamp for $11.99. And my Copic markers that I buy are sold for $6 each at Ellen Hudson. So just to compare, you would get 6 of these colors for $11.99 versus I'm comparing 3, this set against 3, which would be $18. So just to kind of get a reference point. Alright, just to compare at first glance, the markers are much bigger. They're round and these are oval, but these are a lot bigger. It's nice. They have a rubber grip. One of the things though about it that I didn't like is there's 2 caps and it shows you what you're going to see when you open the cap. You've got the chisel tip and the brush tip, and that's very clear. With these markers, you probably can't even see, but you have to kind of keep turning it until you get it just in the right light so that you could see that this is going to be your fine tip and this is going to be your chisel tip. So it's just I keep opening the wrong side. So anyway, that's one thing about this. The Copic markers, the sketch markers, come with a chisel tip and a brush tip. I use my my brush tip pretty much 99% of the time, maybe even 99.9% of the time. The Spectrum Noir markers come with a chisel tip, same with the sketch markers, but they come with a fine tip instead of a brush tip. The Copic, this is an original Copic marker. This also comes with a fine tip and a chisel tip, but I rarely use these because I much prefer the brush to the fine tip, but you can see it's very similar. If you wanted to, you could buy brush tips for your Spectrum Noir and replace them, but they don't come with it. So you'd have to buy all the markers and replace them all at the fine tip side with the brush tip. I'm going to compare these fine tips. So I'm going to compare the fine tip here with the fine tip of the original Copic and the brush tip of a sketch marker. Alright, first is my Spectrum Noir brush or fine tip. I'm just going to draw a line here, and then this is my Copic, original Copic, and I'm going to do the fine tip on this one. It's pretty even. The Copic is a tiny bit thinner, so you get a little bit more precision here. And also it comes out, the ink comes out a little slower. I know you can't really show that in a video, but it's just kind of a feel that I get. And then here's the brush tip, and I'm going to try to do a kind of a light line here. You can see you get a much finer application here. It allows you to do a lot more detail when you're coloring your images. But again, you could get this brush tip in the Spectrum Noir if you purchased it separately. Alright, so let's move on to the actual coloring. Now I want to quickly talk about the colors that are coming in this red set. They are all very similar. So I had a really hard time getting some good color variation in my flower here. So these 3, actually, and this one over here, they're so similar that it's hard to get any variation. This one is a little bit lighter, so I decided to use this one. So I'm using the CR10 and the CR11. The DR7, I couldn't get that to blend with any of these. It comes out almost kind of a very, very dark brownish red. And no matter how hard I tried, a lot of ink was coming out of my pen. I couldn't get it to blend with any of these colors. So what I've done is I've stamped this Artful Flower by Simon Says Stamp. It's one of my favorite flower stamps to color. And I stamped it in Memento ink on Neenah Solar White cardstock. And I'm going to use the CR10 and 11, as I said, here on this flower. And then I'm going to use R22, R24, and R29 down here. So I know I'm using 3 colors here with Copics, but I am comparing the whole red set to the 3 colors of the Copic markers. And if you go back and look at their colors, there really isn't any other options for the red here unless you move into an orange. You can go pinkish, but then that's going to change my color from red to pink. Or I could go more orange, and I don't know if I really want to do that. So anyway, I'm just going to use the 2 colors from this set. Alright, I'm going to start by coloring the way I typically color, which is I use the darkest first, even though I think you get better application by starting with the lightest and doing it all over. But I just get kind of lazy and I always start dark, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that here. So this is the CR11, and I'm just going to color, and you can see how thick this is going on. And it's hard to get precise application of color when it's going on so thick. I feel like when I get my pen to the paper, it's spreading out really quickly, so I have to be careful that I'm not going to go over the lines of this petal. So once I get kind of a shadow area done here, I'm going to take my CR10. I'm going to start at that line. You can see how pretty they blend together. They actually blend really well together, but they are also very close together in color. So you would expect that you get a good blend from 2 close colors. So I'm going to continue this around, and you can see, it's kind of scary how fast the ink is coming out. It feels like it's coming out really thick, so you have to be careful not to go over the lines. But you can see how nice, it's a very smooth application, so it's nice color, it's going down in a nice way, it's not pilling up any papers or anything like that. It's really a nice smooth application of color. So I'm just going to go around here. I'm going to speed through this really quickly. Okay, now that I'm finished coloring this, I don't know if you can see it, but the memento bled a tiny little bit up here. I had to be careful to start a little bit further inside the flower because my tip is bigger than what I'm used to. And I did go out the lines a little bit, and it did kind of bleed a little bit outside the lines. But if you turn over, you could see how much ink is coming out of this marker. So it is a lot of alcohol ink, which would explain why it would be spreading so quickly. So let me move on to this one. Okay, so I have my 3 colors here, and again, if I had a lighter color here, I would use it in the Spectrum Noir set, but there isn't. But I'm going to go ahead and go with these 3. I'm going to start with my R29, and you can see how the lines are much thinner because I do have this brush tip, which is a lot easier to use, and I can kind of flick a little bit. Oh, one thing I did want to mention is you see where there's that little area inside between the middle and the petal, and I couldn't get into that small area with my fine tip, and it immediately started to bleed over the line. Anyway, okay, so let's continue on here. This is R29, and then I'm going to move in with my R24. Just kind of blend that out a little bit, and I'm actually going to carry this out to the edge here and go around the edge because you get kind of a petal that kind of curves downward. Come in a little bit there, and then I'll have my lightest area right here. So I'm just going to blend that together. These 3 reds go really well together. They're part of my favorite set of reds. You can see you get a nice variation here, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. So I'm going to just keep doing this, and I'm going to fast forward all the way around. As I'm coloring this last one here, I do want to mention that I feel like I'm getting a lot more control over the color because it's not coming out as fast, and so I can brush a little bit longer and get color exactly where I want it, and exactly the shade that I wanted, so I can get kind of a lighter version of the color or a darker version depending on how much brushing I do, whereas the Spectrum Noir I really could not do very much brushing because there was so much ink coming out. Okay, so here I'm finishing. You can see I'm kind of lightening it up as I get to the center. And so there we go. So that is the Copic compared to this. And so you're definitely going to get more color variation because of the light color that I used. And if you turn it over, you can see that there's definitely the difference in as far as how much ink is coming out of the pens. And one more thing I wanted to try was to add a little bit of texture. So I'm going to take my CR11, and of course I took the wrong top off, and I'm going to flick upward to try to get a little bit of texture into this flower, and we'll see how that goes. So is this the right color? Yeah, it is. So you can see I see it a little bit, but because these colors are pretty close together, it's hard to get that kind of highlight that you're looking for, because I'm sort of looking to see like there's texture, like veins on a flower. I'm going to keep working around here though, so we can compare it. I'll do it on the Copic in a second. Okay, so that's Spectrum, and then I'll grab my R29, and I get a much easier feathering of the color. So you can see it gets some really nice texture, and I'm going to put this some close-up photos of this on the blog so you can get a close-up, because I know with the video it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing in detail. So we keep moving this around. I always flick upward just because it's easier, and it's not perfect. You can see some of my lines are thick, some of them are thin. It's kind of hard to make everything consistent. Okay, so there you go. There's the flower. So you can see how thick the lines are here as compared to how thin they are here using the brush tip, and it also has to do with the amount of ink coming out. So I think what I would conclude with is that I think, you know, the Spectrum Noir markers are cheaper, they're more economical, but the color variation that you're getting is not very much, and maybe if I had more of the colors I would be able to make this look a little prettier, more, you know, more dimensional. But what you might want to consider if you're trying to decide between these two brands is maybe possibly buying fewer Copic markers, so that you, because with just 3 markers I was able to get this, versus the cost of this was 6 markers. So I mean, I know there's still probably a 50% price difference, but if you bought fewer Copic markers you'd be able to get a nicer look than buying more of the Spectrum Noir. So with that in mind, let me put these caps on. I wanted to share with you this chart that I put together. Actually, Courtney, I hired her to go through all my cards over the last year and mark every single marker that I've used in all my cards over the last year. So this is how frequently I've used all of the markers. So my chart, my completed color chart is here. These are the ones I have, so I don't have all the markers obviously, but I thought it would be helpful for you guys to know how many times I've used each one, so you could see which ones would be more worthy of buying. So for example, the W's, I used them 19 times. I used W1, 15 times I used W3. You move over here and my violets, I only used them once in the last year. So, and this is like you get she put a mark for each card that it was used on. So anyway, I'll take a photo of this so you could take a look and maybe figure out what markers might be worth buying and be more economical about your purchase. So I hope that helped a little bit, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.